We have trial attorney Misty Marris here in the studio in New York with us. Always good to see you, Misty. Let me put up, to follow up on what Joe's saying, some of the Halle Biden testimony from today. One example that we'll put on the screen is as follows, talking about her addiction and using drugs with Hunter. I'm, quote, embarrassed and ashamed, and I regret that period in my life. Joe adds, some more to that in his reporting. But what was accomplished in terms of bringing Halle Biden?
So for the prosecution, it was really important to have Halle Biden testify because she's the one that was with Hunter Biden during the critical time period. Remember, we're talking about the time where he acquired this gun in October of 2018. So prior to this, the other witnesses, his ex-wife, his ex-girlfriend, they weren't with him at the time. So Halle Biden's testimony about Hunter Biden, how he was acting, his drug use, what she saw, the text messages, all really important for that timeline for the prosecution.
All right. So where do you think we are in this case? I want to put up, this is was kind of interesting, this op-ed I saw at USA Today from this guy, Charles Oberle, who writes, I ran for office prosecuting Hunter Biden, but I can't fathom why this trial is happening. The purpose of prosecutorial discretion, he says, to make the law work for its intended purpose, but no office should chase felony convictions in a misguided effort to appease either side in Congress. We had similar discussions about the Trump trial, this idea of facing or chasing a felony. What would you say about this trial?
So this particular trial is unique because usually a gun possession or a falsification of the document that's central to this issue isn't charged on its own. It's usually part of something bigger. It's either that somebody with a felony conviction tries to acquire the gun, or the gun is used in a crime that's more serious, for instance, some sort of violent felony. So this is unique because it's charged on its own. The crime itself is the falsification of the document and possession of the firearm while using illegal narcotics. So it's different than most of these prosecutions.
You sat down, you said there's no, we have plenty to talk about today.
Yes.
Let me switch subjects for a moment and just get your reaction to the news on Steve Bannon. That came out today that, boy, he looks like, unless something changes, he's going to jail, has to report 1st of July.
Yeah, so I expected this to happen because the reason that his jail sentence was actually put on pause was because it was pending an appellate decision. That went before the appellate court in May, who rejected his ask to overturn the conviction. So at that point, he still has other appellate remedies, meaning going to the higher level courts, the Court of Appeals, and maybe the Supreme Court. But in general, in these cases, that's when your sentence would kick in. You wouldn't wait for it to go through the full process. So this is kind of typical.
Okay. The final thing I want to spend a few minutes on here, we're going to spend more time on it even in the next hour of Laura Ingle out at the courthouse on Long Island, is this Gilgo Beach story. So the Long Island serial killer, the guy who's accused of killing the so-called Gilgo Four. We've heard about this story for a long time, especially those of us around this area. But now 2 more charges. So this really expands the timeline of what this guy's accused of doing and how long he's accused of doing it for.
Yeah, as a New Yorker, we've been hearing about this story well before it became national news and the Gilgo task force was actually formed. But we saw just recently another extensive search on his property. We know that there was a canine search in Manorville where one of the new bodies was actually found. So this is ratcheting it up. And I think a lot of the evidence that we saw in the new indictment was the electronic evidence from Huerman's computer, telephone, that was leading investigators down new paths and also corroborating some of what they already have. For instance, these records about his blueprint for the killing. So very, very damaging from that perspective for the defense.
I mean, does it speak to some extent about modern technology and all the ways, whether it's DNA, whether it's electronic evidence, that we have to investigate cases now? If you just keep at it, sometimes you do get a new break, and they kept at it here.
Yeah. Well, formulating that task force was really a significant movement because there was information, for instance, his car, that was already in the possession of law enforcement, but it just hadn't been put together because it was multi-jurisdictional. It was issues of actually putting together the pieces. So formulating the task force, it actually ended up resulting in finding Rex Huerman and these indictments. So certainly the technology has increased, and DNA technology?
Yes.
Well, that's leaps and bounds ahead of where it was before.
Way ahead of it. Now, this is not much of a legal question, more of an observation, but those of us who live in suburban neighborhoods, I think, identify with this case. He's just a guy on the block. You think about this. And for years and years, he's an architect. He's taken the commuter railroad into New York City every day, and apparently, not only was he doing allegedly what we thought he was doing going back a certain amount of time. Now it's going back 30 plus years, possibly. It's unbelievable.
It's unbelievable. And you think of that, somebody who's running their business. There's been people who've come forward and said, he was my boss, and, you know, neighbors and people that have been in their sphere. It's very, very chilling when you see, especially what's coming out in this indictment. Now we have a body going back to 1993.
Unbelievable.
So it's shocking.
All right, Misty, thank you as always. More from Laura Ingle on this in the next hour.